excluded from the White House because they criticized the NCAA. Put it up full mass, let's get into it. The great irony of this story, several female athletes who stood next to President Trump 3 weeks ago to celebrate an executive order banning transgender participation in women's sports were not invited to a White House event Thursday for a briefing on women's sports after they criticized the National Collegiate Athletic Association's new policy, sources told CBS News. The executive order prohibited transgender women and girls from competing in female sports. The measure, called the, quote, No Men in Women's Sports Executive Order, was the fourth executive order targeting transgender people he has signed since taking office back in January 20, all right? So among those who did not get a request to come back to the White House for the briefing on Title IX issues were Riley Gaines, former NCAA swimmer, Sia Liilii, captain of the University of Nevada's women's volleyball team, and Kaitynn Wheeler, a former NCAA swimmer at the University of Kentucky. Some of the athletes have publicly clashed with the White House preferred messaging by openly criticizing the NCAA in social media posts and other public statements. Quote, it's absolutely not a win at all, and we need to demand for better, Wheeler told CBS News. Now, can we just back up for a moment? Let's back up for a moment. Remember when MAGA wanted free speech to be so absolute that they didn't want social media platforms like Twitter, before it became X and others, to regulate the speech or the protected speech of individuals? They did not want people to be deplatformed from a social media site because of offensive or contrary stances. Remember that? Because they really believe in free speech. And then you have individuals who obviously believe in free speech as well. They have this thing with the government. They don't like what the government has done. Free speech is really a dynamic of protection against government punishment because of your freedom of speech. They are literally being punished by the government because they have said something contrary to what the government currently stands for, i.e. the Trump administration. Now, one person in MAGA is going to say a damn word about their speech being violated. But here's what it does in the context of history. It lets them know, and their friends know, and their families know, and the families that they will have themselves know that this is what you fight against. And they will lead accordingly in the future. White House officials told CBS that Thursday's Title IX event is not for state attorney generals, state attorneys general, and is not an effort to encourage them to use sex discrimination authorities already in place in their states to protect women and girls in athletics. Sports figures whose stories have not yet been highlighted by the Trump administration were invited, they said. Some athletes from Maine, whose Democratic governor has said she will fight Mr. Trump's order in court, will be there, one of the officials said. After Mr. Trump earlier this month signed the executive order titled, quote, Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports, the NCAA, the nonprofit that governs college sports, issued a new policy stating a, quote, student athlete assigned male at birth may not compete for an NCAA's women's team, end quote. White House officials said they think the NCAA policy is a victory for Mr. Trump because the organization is not accepting amended birth certificates and is being more aggressive than other sporting organizations, such as the Ladies Professional Golf Association, National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, and the International Rugby League. However, some of the women athletes and advocates at the photo opportunity with Trump have since argued the NCAA policy has major loopholes and continues to allow male athletes to compete in women's sports. Say, who was invited to the White House for the executive order event, but not to Thursday's briefing, said, and others hope Mr. Trump will pressure NCAA to redo it. It should be thrown in the garbage, she said. All right, here's the argument that I would pose. One, you have a regime, the Trump administration, hell bent on separation. Their policy is separation, all right? And because their policy is separation, you're going to get these types of separatist doctrine. And naturally, they do not respect free speech, not even if at one point you stood next to them. All right, so Jackson's thoughts here.
Well, the right in this country, especially, in over the last 10 years in particular, have not really been true advocates for free speech, particularly people like Elon Musk, who can't get off of Twitter. If you insult him in the slightest, he'll just find you and block you or ban you or take away your credentials in some form or fashion. Donald Trump, who's suing CBS, ABC, all these news outlets for $20 billion a piece just because they said something bad about him. And then the whole obsession around transgender people, it's so much of it is just a smokescreen to distract the base from the fact that they're going after things like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. The Republicans always do that. The problem is it actually creates issues for transgender people who just want to live in peace. But transgender people make up like 0.51% of the whole US adult population. And that shrinks even more when you're talking about athletes in the NCAA. I mean, Division I, Division II, Division III, whatever it is. It's hard to get in there. So like we're literally talking about nobody. 2, 3 people, maybe at most. And all of this just to go after the LGBTQ community. But no, man, these people are not about free speech. They're authoritarians. And if you're not completely in line with what they say and what they believe, you're an enemy right away.
Yeah, well said. We'll bring updates as they come. Many are questioning if it's even enforceable by law. I would question that as well.